Hello, good day to all our viewers. I am Cebu Lady Lawyer Attorney Yasmine Moeller, and I will be hosting this episode of Partners in Law. With me is LTO 7 Central Visayas Director, Sir Victor Caindec.
Good morning, Attorney Yasmine, or how do I call you? Yasmine? Yas?
Yeah, you can call me Yasmine or Yas. No.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you so much for giving us your time. And before I begin, we would like to get to know you a little bit more. So how long have you been in public service in this position?
Well, I joined LTO in 2018 January, no? And that's basically going close to almost 34 months of public service. I would be on my third year, hopefully by January next year. But very briefly, I served CTOM for 6 weeks as executive director, and in my private capacity, I became a board member also of CTOM for a while, no? In 2013, all the way I think to 2016. Yeah.
Okay. As executive director, so far, what is one of the biggest challenges you had to overcome?
Let's talk about LTO first. No?
Okay.
Because in LTO, we are a national agency. And as the regional director, I am basically responsible for 4 provinces in Central Visayas. And that includes Cebu, Bohol, Negros Oriental, and of course, Siquijor. So you see different dynamics. The mandate of LTO is basically in registering vehicles, issuing licenses, and of course implementation of road traffic laws, no? Whereas being an executive director in a city, you're basically involved just one LGU, and you implement the law based on the ordinances of an LGU. Being in LTO, the perspective is much higher, considering that you talk about national laws and then you put that into context of how the national law impacts on the local government unit. And we're talking about 4 different provinces and several component cities, no? So you go to Bohol, the dynamics is different. You go to Negros Oriental, that's even more different. But when you go to Cebu, Metro Cebu in itself, there's Lapu-Lapu being independent, there's Mandaue, and then there's Cebu City. Of course, the component cities also, no? And you have the province. So we focus more on frontline service, but we try as much as we can to have a more dynamic role in ensuring better and safer roads in this region. So that has been our advocacy since I joined LTO, no? Better government service, but also safer roads.
You have been following the news recently. You can see that LTO Region 7 has made some big headlines. You have opened one of the biggest
Yeah.
offices in Karkar City, and you have been providing services in areas where they were not yet established. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I think if you look at what we have been trying to accomplish since my role, I assumed the role, it came with the frustration I had, no, before joining government, why we couldn't experience better government service, especially in an agency like LTO. The reputation of LTO has always been, it is the agency you love to hate, no? And one of the biggest frustrations there is that people feel that the service they get from the agency doesn't meet their expectations. Now, we've always had crowded offices, the air conditioning doesn't work, it's not spick and span, you have so many fixers around. And when I came in, I said, what can we do about this? We tried fixing the air cons, making the seats better, etc. But it's all about numbers, no? You have X number of people going into X number of offices. So the ratio of people per office doesn't allow you to actually give better service. So On average, maybe you have 400 or 500 transactions a day in an LTO office. So the same number of people divided by the number of offices gives you that index. So how do you declub? You expand the frontline locations. So far we've opened and separated the registration offices in Cebu City. So in Cebu City, you have now in the mall at Robinson Galleria. We also have SMC side, which caters exclusively to licensing. We have another one in the mall, in Island Center Mall in Mactan. In Bohol, which is really a perennial headache, we were finally able to open in Alturas Mall in Bohol. No? In Lapu-Lapu is Island Central Mall. But it wasn't enough. So we still saw, and in Mandawi, we are in J Center Mall. We saw that it doesn't really put a lot of dent into the initiative we're trying to implement. So we looked at other places. So we're now in Camotes, for example.
Oh, wow.
No? So we are in Camotes. We are already in Bantayan Island. And the objective is, the ambition was that we would double our LTO offices, and that would have reduced by half the number of people theoretically going into LTO's offices. No? Of course, there's a lot of challenges, resource, the administrative aspect, getting the approvals to be there on time. We're working to open in Panglao. We're working to open in Tubigon in Bohol. We just opened Ronda. We're going to open soon in Dalaget, no? Wow. And maybe 1 or 2 more offices, no, in Negros Oriental. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, we opened also in La Libertad. So when Governor Garcia graced our event in Karkar last week, she said, "How many did you open already?" I said, "I stopped counting." I just wanted to make sure that, in my head, if people could travel more than 30 minutes to get to an LTO office, we might have to address that, no? So in Ronda, for example, the farthest that it would accommodate would be Santander, and that's really far.
Okay.
Or Samboan, no, at the very least. So we're opening in Dalaget, that might divide. We also launched what you call the Malasakit bus. So we have an LTO office in a bus, a small bus, that goes to different municipalities. And we serve around 300, 400 people every time we're in one municipality. So we're hoping that by that kind of perspective in going out and bringing services closer to people, people will be more encouraged to comply with legal requirements. No? So our experience was that a lot of people that don't have licenses is because it's so difficult to get a license. No? You know, in Medellin, for example, today, we still can't issue new licenses because we have to comply with certain policies. No? So, registrations, for example, people feel that traveling 4 hours or 3 hours away to the nearest LTO office was such a big risk, they'd rather not register. So bringing the bus, we have been to about 60 municipalities, served more than 30,000 people in the process. And we launched that maybe a year and a half ago.
Wow, amazing work, sir.
Well, it's not enough, no, considering how people judge us on social media. You realize there's really a deeper embedded resentment for the agency, no? If I may just say it like that.
Yeah. But things will turn around. Continue doing your good work, sir, and thank you for your service. And I would like to get at the topic on hand. It was personally selected by you. It's Joint Memorandum Circular number 2018-001 by the Department of Transportation, or DOTR, Department of Public Works and Highways, DPWH, and Department of Interior and Local Government, DILG. So, quickly, sir, can you give us a quick idea on what this is about?
You know, we've been hearing about people dying on the roads, no? Road traffic accidents, they happen about 28 deaths per day, or about more than one person dying every hour in the entire country. And that data was only in 2013. I don't know the data for 2020. But definitely, I can tell you, that's more people dying on the roads of accidents than COVID. In fact, that issue also has a very strong economic impact. No? When an accident happens, you have resources being expended there. government vehicles and rescue vehicles go to the site. You bring the people involved in the accidents into hospitals, and hospitals dedicate all these resources and personnel to treat the wounded. No? The point is, when accidents happen on the road, you're hoping that it was really just an accident, no? And it's not something that was done by intent. But unfortunately, a lot of the accidents that happen here are actually incidents that could have been avoided if we had more proactive interventions, as you call it that. Now, when I got a call to be here, and I said maybe we can use your platform to talk about an initiative that has been well researched, so much resources have been put into it, and the people moving behind this is an organization called Imagine Law that worked with DPWH, DOTR, LTO, DILG to craft together a template that would somehow address road safety in our country. This is what you have read, no? Joint Memorandum Circular 2018-001. What is it all about? It basically crafted a template for local government units to adopt, no, and put into a law of their own where they can now influence how they manage their roads and make it safer for people. One of the things I consider very vital, Attorney Yasmine, is that roads are actually an example of how our democracy works, no? Because ang roads, these are all public, no? And no one can lay claim to say, I own that road. It's spent for by the government. LTO collects taxes in behalf of government, so you can use that road, and that's why you call it a road user tax. But as I explained early on, when you asked me about my role as executive director and regional director, the difference is the harmonization of a national law and the other perspective, which is a local law, or what you call a local ordinance. Now, what is this all about? It harmonizes how the national government and the local government will bring together a unified road safety policy. What are the contents of that circular? It says, local governments can now set speed limits. Imagine Law, together with the 3 different government departments, work together to put proper basis. No? Because local ordinances do not supersede national law. But in this case, this template provides them guidance on how to establish, maybe I'm lost for the proper term for it, but gives them not a sense of supremacy, but enables them, no, to put in place an ordinance where the national government can respect how they have put that ordinance in place. So let's talk about the specifics. In the national perspective, we have what you call speed limits on national roads. And then there's what you call the National Road Classification for DPWH. Pero ang DPWH is not LTO. LTO belongs to Department of Transportation. DILG is the one responsible for LGUs. So, 3 different dynamics are in play, plus the LGU dynamic. So, medyo complicated. So, to simplify it for our viewers, basically, if I were going to apprehend somebody for speed limit violation within the national highway of Bacalso, I have to invoke the 80 km per hour violation, of which no one goes to 80 kilometers per hour in Bacalso because of traffic.
Yes.
So I cannot be the one that would enforce a lower speed limit because I am bound by national law. But CCTO or team of Mandaue, no, or even Litcom in Liloan, maybe they can enforce that with a lower speed limit by creating the ordinance. And therefore, it gives them the authority and the power to say, this template, supported by a local ordinance, allows them to say, if you pass by the borders of Liloan, on Bacalso, we have set a limit of 40 and everybody follows. And we can arrest you for that and apprehend you for that violation. Or the same goes for Cebu City.
Okay. Thank you. We will be right back after this short break. Welcome back. Before the break, we talked about JMC Circular 2018-001, where Sir Caindec explained to us the harmonization between national laws and local ordinances. So there is now this template in place, because if you look at the national law, the maximum speed limit for motor vehicles is 80, which does not apply to every city road because of urbanization and other factors. So the city is actually now has the power, or is empowered, to lower the speed limit according to its needs, using this as a template. Yes. My next question is, how has this been enforced by every city? Let's say in Cebu City, we have Cebu City, Lapu-Lapu City, Mandaue City, and the province of Cebu. How has this memorandum circular been enforced since 2018?
That's a very interesting question, because while it is a joint memorandum circular and therefore deployed as such, and in my perspective, that has trickled down to the local government units. But let's be more realistic about it. In Davao, they have a very stringent policy for speed limits. So you go to Davao, go beyond 40, you get apprehended talaga. But like I said, the JMC is a national document. But in local government units, the dynamics change every 3 years. So you look at the date, it's 2018. In 2019, a new set of government leaders probably took over an LGU. And this is why I'm really advocating for this. I actually passed a copy already to the Cebu province. I passed a copy to somebody from Cebu City. But this has to be an important discussion to be made, and the forum has to be created properly. I still have to go to Bohol and Negros and maybe Siquijor and see if there's any relevance that they can find. But one of the conditions of the JMC very specifically said that the LGUs must submit to the LTO their action and to the DILG to report. We are supposed to monitor whether they have already implemented this, but we have to talk to the DILG about this. And DPWH has to be in the equation as well. So such is the challenge of this JMC, that it actually merits a more robust discussion among stakeholders. For example, passing this law means that the LGUs must have a very clear inventory of their roads. We don't define what is the speed limit in certain roads. We don't even define the roads. LTO doesn't do that. DPWH does that. But within DPWH, they also say, but we have city engineers that are supposed to help us. Like, for example, do you know Virama is a national road? Technically speaking, Colon is a national road. So, be that as it may, I think there has to be ownership of this particular initiative, and it must trickle down to the local government units. Now, whether this is going to be a priority or not in the face of COVID, this is probably not as important. But if you look at statistics, like I said, there are more people dying of road accidents every day than people dying of COVID today. So, when do we address this? When COVID was at its peak, there were no vehicles on the roads. But when people came back, and I already forewarned a lot of the stakeholders, I said, you got to be more specific about what you want to do in the opening, because there will be more vehicles. How did we come back to this discussion? It was about those buses and the accidents that happened attached to these buses. But like I said, these accidents could have been avoided already. So, in my perspective, this is an important topic, but this topic cannot move forward unless people realize that this affects everyday people, no? Ourselves included, and we complain about traffic. And people say, you don't need a speed limit ordinance. It's so traffic in Cebu already. So why do you need that to begin with? And I would say, look, what are the key causes of traffic? Minor accidents. Diba? Motorcycles bumping into a car with a small dent, they cause traffic. And if you have 6 or 7 incidents within a same metro, that causes humongous traffic. I know that from experience in my brief stint with CTOM or CCTO at the time. The economic cost alone is so high, but it is not properly quantified because we don't see it. You know? Unless we go into a traffic accident or someone we know, God forbid, dies of a traffic accident, then it becomes relevant as a topic. Overloading, for example, you see vehicles in their pickups with so many people. Last night, I went up to Trans Central. No? I came back via Trans Central from Bantayan. And everybody was already on the Trans Central Road. No? In fact, going down was so traffic, you felt that it wasn't a Trans Central Highway. So, my question, how should we regulate Trans Central Highway? Should there be a speed limit? Should there be... Because this is just the first step. You implement a speed limit, but then it establishes that the LGU actually has authority over those roads. And so we can now talk about not just speed limits or road safety, we can talk about mobility policy. Nobody talks about mobility policies. Pedestrianization, for example, is covered by this because as a lawyer, you know better that once this establishes the authority of LGUs over specific roads, the LGU can now say, if we can define speed limits, why can we not define mobility options here? In Singapore, I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have worked in a company that allowed me to be in Singapore almost every month, no? And in Singapore, you have streets where you could just walk far stretches and not worry about being mugged or being bumped by a motorcycle going into a sidewalk, no? Etc., etc. I don't even have to take public transportation because I realize it's easier to just walk. So, we start with road safety, then we establish ownership, then we can talk about nicer things like mobility. Talk about personal mobility devices. Kaning mga scooters with electric. They talk about that they want equal rights on the roads, but the law doesn't allow that.
They don't fit in the roads.
I saw a lot of bicycles, and I know a lot of people who are bike enthusiasts, and they're saying, why can't we have safer roads as we bike? Because nobody talks about policy on that perspective. So we can now expand our discussions, but the first step is going back to using this as a foundation. And you know, civil societies, democracies, we exist on laws. And if it's not written, then it doesn't exist.
Yes, you are very correct, sir. One thing I noticed as well about this joint memorandum circular is that it provides for data collection and data analysis in case there are accidents. So it has, in a way, made a uniform report which every LGU should make at the scene of an accident, and in theory, or as it is written, should forward it to your office for you to collate, all via email.
Exactly. But again, I'm being pragmatic in the discussion. This is step one. And this is not the sexy, interesting topic that people want to talk about. It provides a platform, a basis to collect information. But what does this document tell us? Really, it tells us that road safety is an issue. And if you want to address road safety, you start with proper or ordaining properly laws that are relevant to local government units. Once that's done, it establishes that the LGUs actually can have a bigger say in how the roads are going to be used. Which means you can talk now about the more sexy topic, which is mobility. You know, when I work for a corporation, a multinational organization, mobility was one of the subjects we talk about. And when you talk about mobility, people say, what does that mean? But it simply means that we can now decide, for example, if we are Cebuanos and we are living in Cebu City, or Mandawi, or Talisay, or even Bohol in Tagbilaran, or people in Panglao, by adopting this, they use this as a foundation to say, now I'm taking that responsibility. But beyond this, I want to put up protected bike lanes. To put up protected bike lanes, you need to put money. How do you do that? Di ba? You have to first establish the law, then put in the budget. And then you can implement. You can put up protected bike lanes. You can have wider sidewalks. Fuente Osmeña or Osmeña Boulevard could actually be transformed into a walking stretch, no? Where people can move from point A to point B very comfortably without going into a public jeepney or a bus, no? Or even using their cars. Or maybe we can talk about Colon, and why not make Colon a walking street? Because this establishes the authority of LGUs. So, I'm talking about it and people probably say, this guy is like, his mind is all over the place. It's not. I'm saying this is the first step. But having this very important anchor, adopting JMC 2018-001, brings a more dynamic future in the discussions of road safety, road use policy, and eventually mobility. And in the end, that's what we do. We serve people, di ba? People will ask, why is the government not doing anything to address this air pollution? We are. We have emission control testing, we have on-road apprehensions, but it's not enough. People complain about why are there overspeeding trucks. We're apprehending, but it's not enough. So eventually, we have to come to a point where we say, is this important as a topic? Because today we're talking about it now, and we think that it's important, but whether the rest of the LGUs say, that's an interesting topic, how do we participate? So, in my experience, we just create a small ripple, no? And hopefully that ripple effect will have a better impact, no? on people. And in the end, that's what public service is all about.
Correct, sir. So this initially is the first step.
This, I think, is the initial but most critical important step,
where the LGUs and the different stakeholders determine ownership over the roads. So currently, we have national roads, city roads,
municipal roads,
barangay roads, provincial roads. So without this setting the clear lines, who has jurisdiction over which road?
Well,
without this in place, without this being followed?
The concept is simple, no? If the national government paid for it, the national government classifies it. If the provincial government paid for it, they classify it. The local government paid for it, they classify it, etc., etc. Supposedly, that's how you look at things. But like I said, the road classification system is currently and primarily defined by DPWH. And if I'm not mistaken, the last document that classified our roads in a formal structure came out in 2008.
Wow, almost 12
years ago. DPWH Guidebook for Road Classifications, etc. Even that, my experience also working for Philips then, we were trying to look at contracts for lighting. In Europe and in the US and in other bigger countries, we classify lighting requirements based on road classification standards, whether it's CIE or the American system, no? But in the Philippines, since we're not harmonized to that standards, or at the time when I was there, I was not aware if we had any harmonized standards, the way you put street lights on roads are determined by how the roads are defined. So for example, if you have concrete roads, the lighting requirement, you put street lights to illuminate that road, is different from an asphalted road has a different lighting requirement. Did you know that if you had concrete roads, you don't need as much lights in the street light versus the asphalt road, because the asphalt road is black.
It absorbs the light.
Exactly.
And concrete
And therefore it has a
reflects.
higher lumen requirement, no? Even the spacing, etc. There's a whole science to it, which is boring for a lot of people. But like I said, we wonder how come when we go to other countries, we seem to feel safer when we traverse their roads, their sidewalks. And because they have just harmonized their standards.
Thank you so much, sir. We'll be right back after this short break. And we are back. Sir Caindec has shared with us a lot of the things that are going on, as well as the implementation, the steps that are taken to not only modernize and harmonize our roads, but to make it more enjoyable. So, out of all of this, we have learned so very many things about ownership, different road classifications, and jurisdiction. So a while ago, you mentioned that if the national government spends for the road, it belongs to the national government. But who enforces violations on national roads, city roads, provincial roads, municipal roads, and barangay roads as of the moment, without this ownership or proper classification?
We're talking, for example, about motor vehicle-related violations.
Yes.
No? So if you're not registered, you don't have a license, you have no business being on the roads. That's the principle. But registration classification says any vehicle powered other than human force must be registered for it to use the national roads.
Does this include those electric scooters,
Exactly.
electric bikes?
Because if it is powered other than human force, it must be registered. Now, if it cannot be registered for whatever reason, no, whether it hasn't paid taxes, it hasn't met the requirements of homologation, no, it means it can't be on the roads. Second, you have to have a license to be able to use that registered motor vehicle. So any violation to those two fundamental requirements of law means that LTO will have the authority. That covers whether it's national roads, provincial roads, for as long as it is considered as public roads. So when you say public roads, that's owned by the government. So inside subdivisions, we cannot apprehend people there, no? Unless they give us the authority. How we implement varies between national, which is LTO, and the local, which is whatever the traffic organizations are empowered by the local government unit. Cebu City Traffic Office, for example, uses their ordinance embedded on Ordinance 801 to implement traffic rules inside Cebu City. LTO can enforce its rules on a national perspective and basically anchored on RA 4136, no, and other subsequent issuances, even inside jurisdictions of local government units, because public roadman. The nuance there, I would say, is that if LGU says it's illegal, for example, to not have a driver's ID, we cannot use that ordinance to make the apprehension.
Okay.
Only their ordinance can enforce that. No? We can use national laws to enforce our regulations, but not local laws to enforce regulations. JMC 2018-001, particular to very specific provisions, will allow us to implement local ordinances relative to setting speed limits, for example, if they complied with the process, which is they submit to the ILG, they inform the PWH, they inform LTO, we harmonize. So when Cebu City, for example, Mayor Labella actually executed an executive order during the course of the lockdown and during the pandemic lockdown, setting 40 kilometers per hour as a speed limit in the entire city of Cebu. We cannot enforce that because that's a local executive order. So only CTOM can enforce that. But if that came into the provisions set forth by this joint memorandum circular, we can now use the EO of Mayor Labella, which should have been converted into an ordinance, to use that as basis for our apprehensions. So muna siyang mga reasons why there really is a lot of harmonization needed in making better and safer road use policy.
With traffic violations, usually comes a fine or a penalty or a fee unless it's a big transgression where the license needs to be taken away. So with executive orders and ordinances, the violator, does he pay the LTO or does he pay the local government unit that enforced the ordinance?
It's a very good question. First, because they are being apprehended based on a violation of ordinance, that falls under what you call a citation. You are being cited for the offense, for which you pay the local government unit. The difference between the ordinances and where you are issued citations and versus when the police will apprehend you or highway patrol or LTO, in most cases, we hold what is called a temporary operator's permit or a TOP. The difference between citations or TOPs and a citation is the citation, they cannot take your license.
Okay.
But you still owe the local government your penalty, so you have to pay that. The TOP gives us the authority to take away your license until you're able to redeem the ticket. The TOP is good for 72 hours or 3 days, no? So, only LTO has that power. Several local governments attempted to enact ordinances that would give them authority to take licenses. But the concept there, and I think their legal arguments have always failed based on the simple concept that says, if I am from Mandaue, and I am apprehended, for example, in Cebu City, if you take my license, but you do not have the authority to issue a temporary operator's permit, I need to get home to my abode in Mandaue. How do I drive to Mandaue? Because obviously, Mandaue will not respect the citation issued by Cebu City because they're independent. So pag abot nimo sa Mandaue, when you cross the border to Mandaue, you are now driving without a valid license. LTO is the only authority that has that power because we issued the license, not the local government units. That has always been, I think, the long-standing argument on why LGUs would not be able to effectively issue a citation that would substitute the temporary operator's permit, unless a new law is ordained or something, no?
I agree with the need to harmonize now. I see the different problems as well as the LTO is the one who issues the license. They are also the only ones who can take it back. So this TOP gives the driver 72 hours to drive without his license temporarily on the theory that they will be able to redeem the ticket at the closest LTO office.
And if they don't redeem after 72 hours, for whatever reason, they cannot pay the penalty, they don't feel the need to pay the penalty, the TOP is no longer effective if they present it as a substitute for their license. So their right to drive is basically suspended.
And does the LTO later on file a case for those who do not redeem or a collection for the penalty? Because these penalties need to be paid.
Well, I'm sure you know better than us the dynamics of filing cases, no? So we get overwhelmed It depends on what kind of case that they have been apprehended for, no? So, if the traffic apprehension was basically for violations that have no penal provisions, then the biggest penalty for them is they lose the right to drive or the privilege of driving. One thing I want to emphasize, again, driving is not a right.
Correct.
It is a privilege, and that's why people have to apply. And we get bashed for, I forgot to mention, a recent initiative of LTO, which is driven by the new law that created an extension of our license validity from 3 years to 5 years. People are now being required to undergo formal driver's education training. And people are complaining that the accredited driving schools are so expensive. People think that a license should be given to everyone.
Moment you turn 18.
Yeah, the moment you turn 18. Some people, they even cheat on their ages. No? My point is, it doesn't work that way. If it were a right, then it should have been a passport. Or embed na lang na sa imong passport. But getting a license is a privilege, and that privilege comes with responsibilities. We have been for so long under the mindset that a license has to be cheap, has to be easy. How come in more progressive countries, license applications are so rigorous that people actually think it's a turning point in their lives to be able to get issued a license? No? Progressive countries have always been very conservative in issuing licenses. Somebody told me in China it costs 200,000 pesos if you pass.
Wow.
In Canada, the course for driving is about 60,000 pesos. Someone told me, I do Facebook Live once in a while, and someone said, Director, in UK, I studied in a driving school. I spent almost 80,000 pesos equivalent, or I think 1,000 pounds, no? People should get over that idea nga ang lisensya is easy. We're going to start moving towards formal driving education. We will soon have GPS-enabled test cars. We have dedicated test tracks. You mentioned Car a while ago. Car will have a dedicated test track. We're starting one probably in Danao and maybe another one in Mandaue. And eventually the whole country will have that. Motor vehicle inspections are being automated. So in Cebu, we now have 2 in Mandaue, 1 in Danao, and 1 in Car, and more to come. In Bohol, we have 2, I think, yeah. So these are modern inspection centers that are conforming to international standards already. We are hoping that over time, as we professionalize our systems, we're moving towards a better computer system so that people will no longer be susceptible to fixers, no? There's a lot of things that are going on, but these are not like I said, the sexy topics that people like to talk about. But we are moving into a direction where people will eventually realize that the LTO as an agency is actually a very important entity, an institution in promoting road safety, in ensuring that we have competent drivers, that we have road-safe vehicles, and eventually that will transform how people look at the agency in the long term.
Yes, I agree. Traffic flow is a very important economic driver as well. It shows the discipline of the people. It shows the ability to follow laws. So I completely agree with you, sir, on why licenses should not be just issued left and right. And this formal driving school, does it affect all current license holders?
Yes, everybody. New license applicants, student permit applicants actually need to undergo 15 hours of theoretical training before they are issued the student driver's permit. Eventually, we will move towards even those renewing their licenses to undergo certain hours of theoretical driving. No? For new applicants, they will have to go undergo the automated driving program, etc., etc. It's a long discussion. I can discuss it with you at length, but I don't think we'll have time. What I'm just trying to probably emphasize is that when you want to change something, we have to change systemic, no? At a systemic level. For some time, people have been struggling to reform LTO and say, oh, you put this, you put this. It doesn't work. We've been opening up more offices, but I continue to receive complaints about fixers. No? We still hear about certain offices that are not able to render proper service. But as you put in the proper IT system there, more robust and rigid programs, no, for as requirements, even accrediting the medical examinations. Last week, we announced that the drug tests will no longer be mandatory for Region 7. We're the only one that had that requirement for so long. We feel that as we progressively move towards the direction that we think will transform the way we look at government service, people will have better trust. No? And hopefully, as they trust the system better, they'll have better compliance also.
That's a very good goal to have.
Yeah.
And about the bashing, I think it comes with public service.
Comes with the territory.
Yes, especially here in Cebu, isog ang mga Cebuano. But that should not at all stop you from doing your good work. And we thank you for giving us your time and providing service for the people of Central Visayas, may it be Cebu, Bohol. And before we wrap up, can you give us a quick idea as regional director of how your week goes, since you have so many different areas that you are handling? You have Cebu, Bohol, so do you fly? How do you go to each area? Because you have to be on the ground as well.
Well, I think the work ethic I developed in the private sector played a lot of influence in how I do things. No? First, I adopt technology. No? Before Zoom and the pandemic, I've always been working with our officers in the different locations through Viber and social media. No? We track customer feedback because we don't have a formal mechanism. We track customer feedback based on how people are reacting on social media. When I started, LTO7 had 2,800 followers on its Facebook page. That was in January 2018. Today, I think we have more than 100,000 followers. No?
Wow.
Incidentally, I also have 23,000 followers, I think, or 22,000 followers, which I really have to apologize because people send me private messages and sometimes it overwhelms me. I cannot reply to it. What we do is we have been trying to keep our ears very close to the ground, getting people to trust that when they tell us something, we act on it. A lot of the, shall we say, aggressive actions we have taken against shenanigans in the agency were actually driven by social media reports.
Oh.
I filed cases against several dealers, billionaires, oligarchs. I ran after them. No, they ran after me also, big time. I ran after them because after we started analyzing, that in spite of all the... Kasi the way I look at the problem is we look at ourselves first and see what we are not doing properly, try to see what we can do to reform it. We have been trying to make changes internally and we realize people are still giving us negative feedback on our service. And we realize that there are these entities that are actually abusing the system and the flaws that we have in our system. Transparency is key in government service. People don't have to thank us for a job well done. We have been paid, no? Matod pa ni Presidente, gibayaran mo sa tao para magserbisyo, ay mo si pangita diha og kanang pasalamat sa mga tao. And I agree with him 101%, and we stand behind his belief that to stop corruption, we have to make sure that people trust government first. No? And to do that, you have to render proper government service. So, what I do is I look at social media. I'm very active on social media in that perspective. I get my news real time in some ways. I manage our operations through Viber, no? Electronically. We do Zoom. Most importantly, I have a random system where I appear in certain offices and announce. No? So I don't have I don't see the necessity, for example, for formal welcomes when the director arrives. You know, these traditions that they have where the director goes to an office and everybody is there in their nice uniforms and well-dressed, and the office is like newly painted. I go there unannounced and I tell them, I'm giving you this time to fix it up, etc., etc. But I'm also very pragmatic. We are an agency that doesn't have a lot of funding. 92.5% of the money we collect goes back to the national government, and that's going to DPWH. The remaining 7.5% of what we collect, it goes to the Department of Transportation, which is our mother unit. And in the end, in the region, we more or less get about 1.5 to 2.5% at most of whatever we collect. So if we collected 1.88 billion last year, less than 200 million ang niabot sa Region 7 actually. So, and all of that goes to salaries. The opening of new offices, no, the locations we have been in Galleria, no, I would invite you if you need to renew your vehicle, and very soon it will be able to cater to new license applications also very soon. If you go to Galleria, Robinsons, LTO Cebu City District Office is there. It's in a 400 square meter property, but we didn't spend a single cent to fix it. So, Ronda, Karkar, you saw Karkar was a very expensive place. 14 million pesos spent by the proponent. We didn't spend a single cent. So, we try to make do with what we can to improve our service. And I think, like I said, we want to leave this as a legacy, not by the structures we have built, no, but the kind of culture that we have created today for people to believe there is still hope that change can happen in government.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Sir Caindec, for your time, and may you continue the good work that you are doing. You can watch more of our episodes on our YouTube channel, Partners in Law Celia. That's all caps CELLA. And I wish everyone watching a good day and a good week ahead. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.